Hi, I'm Rabbi Dunner. Welcome to my weekly Erev Shabbos Dvar Torah, this week for PARSHAT SHEMOT. Soon after Moshe killed the Egyptian taskmaster who was hitting the Jewish slave, Moshe tried to break up a fight between two Jews. But rather than allowing him to bring peace between them, the combatants turned on Moshe. Who made you a boss over us? Are you going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? The Pasuk then says, Vayira Moshe, Vayomar, Achein Noida Hadovar. Moshe was frightened and he said, it's clear that the matter is known. What did he mean? What was he talking about? According to the simple reading of the Pasuk, Moshe suddenly realized that everyone knew he had killed the Egyptian and therefore his life was in danger. But the Medrash explains the Pasuk differently. Moshe had been wondering why the Bnei Yisrael were enslaved. Why were they suffering so much, more than any other nation? What was the sin that caused them all this suffering? After hearing what the two fighting Jews said to him, suddenly he understood. Now I understand it. Ochei noid hadova, he said. Once he heard those words of accusation, he realized the reason for the continued slavery. There were people who gossip. There were people who were speaking Lashon Hara. How would they ever be worthy of redemption? The Chofetz Chaim says in Sefer Shmiras HaLashon that in Egypt, the Jewish people were idol worshippers, just like everyone else, like the Egyptians. Halolu oved avodah zarah, v'halolu oved avodah zarah. And they committed other sins in Egypt as well. By the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, they had sunk to the 49th out of 50 levels of impurity on the spiritual scale. And yet, Moshe Rabbeinu was stumped. He couldn't understand what sin had caused them to suffer so much. But because of what those two Jews said to him, he had a Eureka moment. It was the fact that they spoke Lashon Hara. Says the Chofetz Chaim, we learn from this medrash that a person or a community can have tons of sins that they're guilty of, but what brings them down is the sin of gossip. The Zohar says that a person who speaks Lashon Hara sets in motion a force in heaven that blows back against them. That's the power, the negative power of Lashon Hara. Every other sin can lie dormant, but Lashon Hara unleashes the forces of retribution. Do you know why? It's simple. Normally, God has the option of either ignoring faults or noticing them. However, when a person speaks Lashon Hara, he is saying, look at the bad part of that other person. Midah keneged midah. Divine justice will look at his actions or her actions in a negative light as well. If you focus on the negative, I guess I will focus on the negative too. If you judge others negatively, God will judge you negatively. It makes perfect sense. It's actually quite scary. When a person speaks Lashon Hara, he has to take into account that he is not only hurting himself and not only hurting the person he's talking about, but he can provoke heavenly retribution against the entire community, everyone. Wow, right? At the beginning of the second section of Shmiras HaLashon, the Chofetz Chaim quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, Proverbs. Yesh misashev ein kol misroi sheish v'hoin rav. A person can become rich, and yet he has nothing. The Chofetz Chaim says that this means that a person can be in business, making big sales, he can be raking in the money, making deposit after deposit in the bank, but when it comes time to do his accounts, his annual return, and he looks at his expenses and his debits, he may discover the bottom line is in the red and that he's got nothing left. I had a great year, fantastic revenue, but there's no net profit. All the profits were wiped out by the expenses. The Chofetz Chaim applies this pasuk to spiritual matters. A person can do mitzvahs his entire life. He can spend days and night learning Torah, doing Gemilas Chasodim, but that same person might speak badly about other people all the time. When he or she arrives in Shamayim, in heaven, and takes a look at the balance sheet, they might discover that they have nothing left at all in their account. I don't understand. What happened? I was so good. I was honest. I gave charity. Where are my mitzvahs? That is the negative power of Lashon Hara. There are those who become rich but have nothing left. We are rich. We are accomplishing in learning. Look at the crowds in classes and study groups all over America. We are learning, but let us not lose it. All we must do is learn to close our mouths. This is the intent of the statement of the Vilna Gaon. The main way to merit the world to come is through guarding the mouth. This is more important than all of the Torah and all of the other accomplishments. The mouth is the Holy of Holies. We have the power to make sure that all the good we do isn't lost, that our mitzvahs carry the weight and the power that they should. Do you know how we can do that? By stopping ourselves from judging others badly and then speaking Lashon Hara about them. Moshe Rabbeinu discovered that the Golus in Mitzrayim was perpetuated by Lashon Hara. Maybe it's the same with our Galut. So let's bring Moshiach. Let's harness the power of all our mitzvahs by not speaking Lashon Hara. We can do it, you and me, together. Wishing you Shabbat Shalom and a wonderful week ahead. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.